Warning, this podcast may include discussion of violence, sexual content, or other sensitive issues. It will almost certainly include spoilers. Hello and welcome to the Between the Lines podcast. My name is Janine. I'm a library clerk at the South Central Regional Library, Winkler Branch.
And I'm Jess. I'm the branch administrator of the Winkler Library.
This is a podcast where we discuss books.
The things we love, the things we hate, the things that drove us crazy. What we do is read the first half of the book, we discuss the front cover, because we all judge books by their covers, our impressions of the first half of the book, and then for the second part, we can discuss our final impressions. We thought that this would be an interesting way of doing a podcast, because my impressions of the book halfway through and my impressions of the book at the end are always quite different. Sometimes it's relief at being done, sometimes it's a shame that the book is over. So with that, here is this week's book.
Okay, so this week's book is Furious Hours by Casey Cep. So I'm going to read you the summary of the book. Reverend Willie Maxwell was a rural preacher accused of murdering 5 of his family members for insurance money in the 1970s. With the help of a savvy lawyer, he escaped justice for years until a relative shot him dead at the funeral of his last victim. Despite hundreds of witnesses, Maxwell's murderer was acquitted, thanks to the same attorney who had previously defended the Reverend. Sitting in the audience during the vigilante's trial was Harper Lee, who had traveled from New York City to her native Alabama with the idea of writing her own, In Cold Blood, the true crime classic she had helped her friend Truman Capote research 17 years earlier. Lee spent a year in town reporting and many more years working on her own version of the case. Now Casey Cep brings the story to life, from the shocking murders to the courtroom drama to the racial politics of the Deep South. At the same time, she offers a deeply moving portrait of one of the country's most beloved writers and her struggle with fame, success, and the mystery of artistic creativity.
So we've read part 1 and 2 of the book. Janine, what did you think?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I was so excited to read this book because I had heard about it on a podcast that I've been listening to for, 3 or 4 years already. And they talked very highly of this book, and they actually did an episode on this case. So I was really excited. So far, I'm a little disappointed, to be honest.
Me too.
It's a lot more...
I wouldn't label it as true crime.
I wouldn't.
It's history.
It's more history with a little true crime thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she focuses a lot on, like, the history of the area and, like, the insurance fraud. She talks a lot about insurance and how, like, that sort of came to be. And, like, the actual crime part was a very small part of the story.
Yeah. Like, there's pretty much a chapter on the history of life insurance, which, to be fair, I found quite interesting, because it's one of those things that we're just used to having. Mm-hmm. I never really thought of, at what point did somebody go, okay, your life is worth this dollar amount.
Yeah.
But, and frankly, it's older than I thought it was.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, it's not that it's not interesting, it's just not what I expected.
It's just not the typical true crime.
Yeah. And so, I think the third part is mostly focused on Harper Lee.
Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of Harper Lee at the beginning, or first 2 parts.
So I'm not sure. Like, I think the true crime part of the book is pretty much done.
Which would be disappointing, because there's barely been any. I kept going, but where's the crime?
I know. And so, like, yeah, for me, it was yeah, it took me a long time to read it, too. Like,
it's an interesting read, but it's not a quick read.
It's not.
There's some true crime where you just kind of zip through it.
Mm-hmm.
This, it feels like it's written as fiction, but it doesn't read as quick as fiction.
No, and that's, like, the thing I like about true crime. I'm not a huge nonfiction reader because it does read slower. But the thing I like about true crime is usually it does read like fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it could be fiction, but this was more like
storytelling, background characters, area development, as opposed to motives, opportunity. Like, that's kind of the thing that got me, is just like, okay, we're discussing this like we know he did it, and we know all the details of it. but without ever actually looking into any deeper motive, any, like...
Yeah.
It's... The crime part is very surface.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite used to the people going, like, okay, we're digging into the nitty-gritty. We know he had a hot dog at this point in time. We know he had, he stopped at that gas station.
Yes.
He was captured on this camera.
Yeah.
I'm used to the nitty-gritty details and basically the minutia of it.
Yep.
Whereas this is like, well, a car was found on the side of the road again. It had a dead body in it again.
There's always a car on the side of the road.
There is a point where I'm going, seriously, Reverend?
I know.
There's a lot of dead people in the Bible. Can't you pick up some tips?
Get a little creative, right?
Well, it's always the same thing. I'm kind of going, you didn't even put in any effort.
Mm-hmm.
The most was his stepdaughter?
She was the last one.
The last one, yeah, where she got squished by a car.
Yes.
So I'm like,
that's a little more interesting.
Kudos to you for trying something new. I mean, not agreeing with the murderer, but, like, it's one of those where it's a miracle he got away with it because it's painfully obvious every time.
Oh my goodness, I know, it's so true. And, like, so I know that Casey Cep used Harper Lee's notes and research to write this book. And so I found myself also wondering how much of that was, like, Lee's research.
Yeah.
Like, did she have all of that stuff in there, or is that something that Cep had added?
It would be interesting to see what parts Harper Lee influenced.
Yeah.
Or to what degree her actual involvement is.
Mm-hmm.
Because a name like Harper Lee, you stick that on the front cover and you got a seller.
Yeah.
If it was one of those where it's just more... Because Harper Lee was investigating the trial as well, we kind of played off her name to make it a bestseller, but yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and I know, like, she helped Truman Capote write In Cold Blood, and I read that book years and years ago, and I wanted to read it again, so I started it recently. I could not get through it the second time. The first time, I thought I really liked it, but it was also very slow reading, and so I would like to try again, but now my to-be-read pile is huge. So someday when I have more time, which is never, but, like, I don't remember it being so detailed on the history as this one, but there was just so much detail, and so maybe Harper Lee's was going from that, because she did help him with writing In Cold Blood too, so.
True. But, like, that's the thing with this one. It's so detailed, and about unnecessary stuff.
Well, like, the very first part of the book starts off about how they build a dam and fill up a valley or something?
Fill up the valley or the chasm.
But there was a town in there, right?
Yeah.
And so they filled it up and made a lake. I don't understand what that has to do with the story.
That's the thing. Like, when I first read that, I'm like, okay, so this lake is going to be involved somehow, and, or the dam. Maybe he pushes somebody off the dam. No, just a local area feature.
Yeah. Well, and the lawyer has, like, a property there, and so they go there and whatever.
Yeah, but still,
it doesn't add to the story.
There's no point in having all this detail. Is it interesting? Sure, it's a bit of local color.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you look back and go, what the heck was that doing there?
Yeah. That's kind of like when I started reading, I was like, why am I reading this?
Filler.
But, lost my train. Oh, probably, I think the insurance fraud is also part of the true crime, which she does spend a significant amount talking about. For me, I'm more interested in the murder part than the insurance fraud part.
It depends on if it's done cleverly.
Yeah.
Like, if the insurance fraud is done in a interesting manner, yes, but definitely by all means.
Yeah.
But this guy was bloody obvious about it.
Oh, no doubt.
Like, for every letter that he wrote to the insurance companies, he basically should have put, whoops, I did it again.
I know. I mean, there was a few things about the insurance fraud that I found really interesting. Like, he bought a 25-cent insurance policy on his first wife and got $15,000 in return when she died. And I was like, it's a pretty good return. Yep. So there's that. And then I wrote in my notes, poor Mary Lou.
Oh, I feel bad for her.
And then I thought, that probably sounds a little sarcastic, and I did not mean it to be at all.
That's the thing. Like, he murdered Mary Lou after 13, 15 years of marriage, something like that.
It was, like, multiple digits for sure. Like double digits.
He didn't start killing anybody until way late in the game.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, do we class him as a serial killer? Not really, because it's family members.
Well, I don't know if that...
Serial killer, I think, is more than 3, but also unrelated people often. This is not.
No, and he was never convicted for...
No.
Anything.
But he killed nobody for the first, 40-some-odd years of his life?
That we know of.
That we know of. I think the insurance companies would have a record if he did. But then he started killing... Like, he killed, 5 people within about 2-3 year span?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what flipped that switch.
I know.
I want to know what happened.
I know. And they didn't...
And that isn't covered in the first 2 parts.
No, it's not. And it's, like, he was away, she was home alone, and then all of a sudden she was dead.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay. And so there was, like, they talked to the neighbor, and she gave some conflicting information and stuff.
How do you pronounce the neighbor's name?
Dorcas.
Dorcas. Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing, and then everything. And it's not as though this guy just went, oh, there's money to be made and people dying?
Mm-hmm.
I should do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of an odd... I don't know. Maybe he killed a bunch of other people before and then went, I could make money doing this.
Yeah, maybe.
But there's not really any kind of record.
No, and, like, it doesn't really get to the motive aside from greed, I guess. You could say that greed was his motive. But, I don't know.
But still, like, yeah, he had fairly decent insurance payouts.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
Like, he was making good money. And the fact that, like, the insurance companies were even trying not to pay him.
Oh, yeah, they were trying very hard not to pay.
Like, but the fact that most of them in the end ended up still paying him, I was like...
You get stuck by your own contracts.
Yeah. And I think on one of his victims, he had 17 insurance policies, which I was like...
Something like that, yeah. I'm like, how is that even legal?
I know. And, like, it would never even occur to me to take out an insurance policy on, like, my siblings or my parents or something. Like,
No.
Why would I do that?
It baffles me that that's even legal, that I
know.
can take out an insurance policy on you.
Yeah.
Like...
I know.
If you're going to take out an insurance policy, you should have the person who you're taking out the insurance policy on there.
Yes.
And they should have to sign.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I can just go, haha, but now insured you, watch out.
Or maybe that's just an American thing. I don't know.
Could be.
But, like...
For all the history of the insurance policy and how the Romans used to do it, we don't have anything really current.
No. But, like, the other thing she talked about was speculative insurance policies, where you could basically, like, it was like betting almost.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so weird. Like, that was, like, way back, and I think in, like, England or something.
Yeah, 1600s, I believe.
Yeah, well, I can find it here, because I did write down
Because it's basically, do we think Tim over there is more likely to die of the plague, or live to the ripe old age and die of old age?
Yeah.
Like, just kind of guessing how people are going to die and how much...
Yeah,
to be fair, same thing's done these days.
Yeah.
Like, it's... Your insurance is affected by... If you drink a lot, if you smoke a lot, you have to state that on your insurance form. So it's kind of the same these days.
A little bit. But yeah, she does say a practice barely distinguishable from betting.
Mm-hmm.
And not just, like, when people die. It says you could buy speculative policies with payouts contingent on everything from whether a given couple got divorced to when a particular person lost his virginity, or in one infamous case, if a well-known cross-dressing French diplomat was biologically a man or a woman. So not just death, but
Pretty
anything.
much everything, yeah.
I like this one. Nicholas, if Christ had not died for thee, thou hadst been damned bare bone. And I was like, is that...
That's quite the handle.
I know.
What was his father's name again? Something like,
His father.
Praise the Lord.
Praise God, bare bone.
Praise God, Barebone, yeah. Imagine having that as a name.
Yeah, I know.
Hello, Praise God. Is Praise God in the house? Got to deliver here for Praise God.
Praise God, your table's ready. Praise God, table for two.
It'd be, oh goodness. It'd definitely be an interesting thing.
Yeah, it would sure be. So, yeah, and even, like, the trial at the end, when Burns went on trial, was so short, like, 2 chapters or something, and I was like...
There's the whole big part explaining, like, the lawyer's history and how, he's such a good guy.
I don't care about the lawyer.
His political ambitions and, like, running for senator and stuff. Where I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah. Is this necessary?
Condense it down.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah.
They had more about the lawyer and his backstory than the murderer.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, okay, I get that it is interesting that the lawyer is now defending the guy who shot his last client.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know more about the guy that shot rather than...
Mm-hmm. But also, let's get into that, how he defended Reverend Maxwell for years and years, and now he's defending his murderer, and, like, how that came to be. Let's talk about that a little more, and,
Yeah.
you know, let's get into that.
Well, that's the thing where I'm going... And, the chapters about the lawyer were very much he's a stand-up guy, he's a great guy, you know. He's pillar of the community, great family man. I'm going, What about all the insurance fraud he's helped?
Yeah. I know.
Like...
I know.
I mean, anybody with half a brain knows that that's not right. Like...
Exactly.
Sure, he may be a stand-up guy, but he's essentially turned a blind eye...
Yep.
To everything that's been happening.
Yes.
And, I mean, he said that he would not have defended Maxwell for the last murder.
Yeah, well, he says that.
He says that, but he says that after Maxwell's dead.
Yep.
Like...
So it's not even an option.
No. And he's basically just saying that to appease them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nothing really about that last murder other than the fact that, she got squished by a car instead of a dead one. That... laid any more blame or guilt on Maxwell than any of the other ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and also in court, he seems like a real bully.
For all of the talk about he's great, I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
I don't know. He may not be as racist as everybody else, but that doesn't make him a good guy.
Obviously good at his job, though.
Yeah.
Like, he's an effective lawyer.
He got Maxwell off how many times?
Mm-hmm.
And got him how much money from insurance companies?
Yeah.
Like...
Well, and of course he probably took a cut of that, right? So it was in his interests to make sure those policies paid out.
Which again makes him not a good guy because he's profiting off somebody else's murder.
Exactly.
But, like, there was not a whole lot on Robert Burns.
No.
Which, considering it's about his trial, meh.
Yeah, so it was a bit of I've been waiting to read this book. When I heard about it, I ordered it right away. I was telling you about it. And you were like, we need to do a podcast about it. And I was like...
Sounds really interesting.
Now I can't read it. I would have, like, started it, like, the next day or something. And you were like, no,
you're ruining your plans.
I know. And now I'm like, I waited so long to read this book. And now it's like, it's just a letdown.
It is.
I am interested to read more about Harper Lee, though. Because, some of the things that I read while prepping for this, she seems like a very fascinating...
She definitely is.
But...
And it'll be interesting to see what the last part of the book is. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping they go a little bit more into true crime stuff, but honestly, it's a slim hope at this point.
Yeah.
But
I did read an article about this book, and they talked about, like, the last part where she talks about Harper Lee and how, like, it sounded really good, the last part. Mm-hmm. So, of course, everything I've read about this book has been, like, spectacular reviews.
It's a great book. Yes. Everybody loves this book.
Yes.
And here we are going, not so much.
Like...
Thing is, I think it's a great book if you're not expecting true crime.
Yeah.
If you're expecting true crime, you're going to be disappointed.
Yes.
If you are expecting a painting of the American South and the courts and the trials and this particular town, does that very, very well.
Yep.
But if you're looking for the nitty-gritty details of the case and all that, you're not going to get that.
No.
At least not yet.
At least not yet. And the fact that it says murder in big letters on the front cover is like... So it's just definitely not what I expected.
No.
So
we're going to have to read another true crime one that's a bit more stabby.
Yeah. I am hopeful that the third part will just bring it home.
I hope so.
Redeem this book.
Thing is, there's been pretty much nothing about Harper Lee yet other than the first couple sentences where it's like if you weren't introduced you wouldn't have noticed her kind of, but...
Yeah, and that was maybe even in the introduction, right? Like nothing...
Yeah, that was basically the intro. No. We'll see.
Yeah.
Do you have any book info for us?
I sure do. So, Harper Lee sat through the trial of Robert Burns, but if she ever started or wrote the book that she was planning to write about this case, it has never been found. So, I don't know if she actually wrote something or not, but
What, you don't know?
I don't know.
You personally don't know? You can't solve this mystery?
Cannot solve the mystery, but even her lawyers can't, so.
Thing is, Harper Lee wrote 2 books, one of which is published pretty much relatively immediately. The next one that was published after her death, because it was only found as a manuscript that she wrote before, the How to Kill a Mockingbird. You never know, we might be due for another surprise.
The Ghost Set a Watchman, which was her second book that was published, was actually an early draft of To Kill a Mockingbird. So not technically 2 books, if you think about it. So...
Okay, she's had 2 books published, not 2 stories published.
So, put
it that way.
While I was researching, I didn't put in my notes, but when the Ghost Set a Watchman was found, some people theorized that To Kill a Mockingbird was the first book in a series, and then there was supposed to be like an in-between like bridge between the 2 books, and then Ghost Set a Watchman was the 3rd book in the series. So that's what a lot of people were thinking, but after like reading it, doing a bit of research, they realized it was an early draft of To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah, which I thought was really interesting.
It is interesting. It's odd. I don't know. It's one of those things where I always kind of, any famous painter, author, anybody that's got work out there, I find it very interesting that if you're famous, the stuff that you've done before, the stuff that was not good enough, is now all of a sudden, fantastic. The early work, you can see the brushstrokes and the development. And it's like, yeah, this wasn't good enough for you before.
Yeah,
like
until they became...
And hypothetically, if I were to become famous, I would not want all of my earlier stuff to be published or distributed.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like, no, that's a draft. That is not the best that I can do. That other one that I already published was the best that I can do. Stop bringing this other stuff up.
I think what I read, there was a little bit of controversy over that as well. Yeah. Because I think they found the manuscript before she died, if I remember.
Before she died?
I think so. I don't know if it was published before she died, but they definitely found it, pretty sure. Okay. And there was some, like, controversy there because I think at that point she was maybe in a home already. I didn't record all the details, but, like, and I'm not sure... Some people were saying, well, maybe she wasn't totally with it and she would just sign whatever somebody put in front of her. And so she wasn't really aware that this was happening. Something like that. So I don't know. But it's interesting, though, because I don't know if you've read either of those.
To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah.
To Kill a Mockingbird, yes. How to
Go Set a
Watchman, no. Okay. Not How to Set a Watchman.
So the Go Set a Watchman actually takes place, like, after To Kill a Mockingbird. So it makes sense that people could have thought that it was a sequel. Yeah. But... Anyways, so in writing the book, Casey Cep used Lee's notes as well as her own research, which I think we talked about already. The book debuted at number 6 on the New York Times hardcover nonfiction bestsellers list, which is pretty high.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And President Barack Obama chose this book as one of his favorites of 2019.
How does he have time to read?
I don't know. But he always, I want to say almost every year, he releases a list of books that were his favorites from the year.
Don't think we'll ever be getting that from Trump.
So I thought that was kind of interesting that, even the president is reading it.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that we had high hope for this book.
It makes sense. Like, everybody built it up as, like, it's fantastic. And then it's kind of like...
Yeah.
Can we have more blood, please?
I know. And I heard a true crime podcast about this case. And it was so interesting.
Did it have more details?
I think so.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I feel like, again, I'm used to true crime where if there's a detail, they're talking about it. Like, they leave nothing out.
Yeah.
This one, it feels like just a lot of the stuff was left out. I'm like...
I know. Like, I listen to true crime podcasts where episodes are, like, 3 hours long. So, obviously... Well, 3 hours is, like...
Yeah. I went through a John Wayne Gacy one recently, and that was 4.5.
That's a lot of Gacy.
Yeah.
But...
Could detox with something fluffy after that.
But, like, considering that when we started, somebody told us nobody's going to listen to this for an hour.
Yeah, true. That's what podcasts are, though. Like, they're long.
Yeah.
I don't know about everybody else, but I prefer podcasts that are long because then I don't have to find something else while I do... Like, it's listen to a podcast while I do whatever else. I don't want to have to go back every 20 minutes and find something else.
Yeah, that is true. So, yeah, I mean...
No. Like, I'm just disappointed, honestly.
I know.
Like, do we even know what the murder weapon was?
Like, when he was killed?
Like no. When he killed everybody else. Because they were all found in their cars.
Yes.
But a lot of them had leaves and dirt and stuff like that in their mouth. How did he kill them? We haven't even covered that.
Yeah.
Like, it was more, they were found. We pretty much know that he's guilty because he keeps collecting insurance on these people. But there's no...
Well, they talk about toxicology a lot.
Yeah, but that's mainly because the whole history of toxicology in the state and how it's, like, properly funded and that kind of thing. So it's actually quite a good program.
But there's never any, like, drugs evident.
The alcohol, the ethanol in the brother?
Yeah, that one. But his brother was, I think, a heavy drinker anyways.
Yes.
So that doesn't necessarily... Although they said that the amount, like, the percentage of alcohol was, like...
It was, like, 40 or 50% alcohol in his blood.
It's insane.
Which is just, like, a tap, you're good to go. Like...
Yes.
It was to the point where you basically had to be forcing it down his throat.
Yeah.
Because he would have been blackout drunk at that point.
That or he had a super high tolerance for it.
You never know. But,
but one thing I found really funny, it says, the county coroner was an electrician by training.
Yes.
And I was like, what?
As long as he doesn't try and combine the two and like Frankenstein something.
So, but yeah, it doesn't like, I want to say Mary Lou, his first victim.
Mm-hmm. That we know of. His first wife was beaten, I think. She was.
And so I don't know if that was actually the cause of death or...
That's the thing. They're not specific about it. It's basically these people are found dead.
Yeah.
And you don't just pull your car over on the side of the road and die.
No.
That's not how it works. They didn't have heart attacks or anything like that. No. But they don't really go into, like, the details of murder weapons and that kind of thing to actually really establish Maxwell's guilt.
Yeah.
The main thing that establishes guilt for Maxwell is the fact that he's collecting life insurance policies on these people.
Mm-hmm. And not just one, but multiple on every victim.
I
don't know.
They've used the insurance policies more than the actual evidence of the murder itself.
Yeah. One of the victims, maybe Dorcas, but they talked about her hyoid bone, I think, had been broken.
Yes.
And usually that's an indicator of strangulation.
Generally. But the coroner also said oftentimes that happens during an autopsy.
I know. And you would think...
If it's strangulation, you think there'd be ligature marks of some kind.
Yeah, some kind of bruising or something, right? I know. I just was wanting more of the true crime, less of the history of all of that stuff. Like...
I don't need to know how to build a dam.
No.
I don't need to know how murder was done either, but I'm more interested in one than the other.
Yeah, that is true. And I don't need to know the history of insurance from the 1600s.
I found interesting and valid to the book.
But a little too much.
But there was a point where I'm going, really?
Yeah, it's too
Can we
much.
be done now? Like, we go into the Great Fire of London for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need that.
So, any hopes and dreams for part 3?
Put it this way. I enjoyed part 2 once I got over the fact that it was not a murder mystery or a true crime. So, unless they really do a turnaround and go full true crime for the third part, I'm content to just look at it as a nice slice of history as opposed to true crime.
Yes.
So, if I can maintain that mindset, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that they go a bit more into Robert Burns, because he was not even touched on, really. It's basically he shot him. He's got a new lawyer. Let's talk about the lawyer.
Yeah, let's talk about the lawyer. They did cover the trial, sort of.
But not...
Look at her.
Oh, wow, she does. Sorry, we just looked at a picture of the author in the book, and she looks like she'd come after you.
She really does. I just wanted to check.
Does she know what we're saying about her writing?
Oh, let's hope she never hears this. I just was...
Casey, next time we want more blood, please.
Looking to see if... So part 3 is called The Writer, which I think is going to mainly focus on Harper Lee.
That's what I'm expecting, but...
So I'm not sure how much crime we'll get out of that, but...
Unless Harper Lee had a secret past they discovered.
Perhaps.
There's a reason why all her books are court dramas.
No one knows.
What a twist that would be.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, we'll go read part 3 and come back with all our complaints about how it wasn't bloody enough for us.
Let's hope not.
It'll be interesting either way. It's Harper Lee, it won't be boring.
No, it won't be. As I was preparing for this, there's a lot of... She's fascinating.
She is, yeah.
Yeah. So...
Well, we'll learn more about her and we'll be back.
All right. We're back with part 2 of Furious Hours. So, part 3 of the book. Basically a biography of Harper Lee.
Pretty much.
What are your thoughts?
I think the entire book should have been a biography about Harper Lee.
Might have been better.
I just, the way the book is set up, I was thinking about it when I finished it. I wouldn't have set the book up the way it is. I would have started off with, like, the first half of the Harper Lee section, up until the part where she starts investigating the murder. Put that at the beginning, then did the murdery bits, and then finished off.
Yes.
That's how I would have set it up.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea.
It kind of felt like halfway through the Harper Lee section that I needed to go back and review and basically make those changes myself as I was reading. To kind of just update, because I kept going, wait, who's that person? When she was investigating, talking to all the people. Yeah,
there's a lot of names in this book.
A lot of names.
I do actually want to read a biography on her now, though, because she's kind of fascinating.
She's definitely interesting. Like, she lived life on her terms and, like, I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
And in that era, I mean, mad respect, because that was not the easiest thing to do.
But also, she wrote one book, and that gave her enough money to live the rest of her life.
Well, she wrote one book. She has done articles and other things.
Yeah, but it didn't sound like even a ton of articles.
Not after she wrote the book, but, like, the school newspaper and for her father's thing.
Okay,
like,
so before she was famous.
Printed other things,
or
had other things in print, but it is her only book.
Yeah.
And I have thoughts on Go Set a Watchman.
Why? What are your thoughts?
That was it Carol woman? I don't think Harper Lee knew that it was being published. I don't buy that she agreed to have it published. It's too coincidental.
Yeah.
Like,
you're
telling me that, like, 6 months after the sister who was in charge of all her finances and all that kind of stuff dies, this other woman comes along and all of a sudden Harper Lee's fine with it being published after holding out for how many years, knowing full well how much money she could have made off it. There's no way in heck Harper Lee agreed to that.
And knowing essentially that it was an early version of To Kill a Mockingbird, so what's the point? Like, I mean, the novels are quite different. I read To Kill a Mockingbird, like, years ago, and then when Go Set a Watchman came out, I reread To Kill a Mockingbird, and then I read Go Set a Watchman. They are very different, but obviously To Kill a Mockingbird was the intended publication, not Go Set a Watchman. So, I know, I found that part a little bit sketchy also.
That is... It feels very much like a cash grab by What's-Her-Face, like...
And I wonder,
I'm not buying it, because at that point, Harper Lee was already having problems, memory-wise, so... And
how much was she being controlled, and, like... Somewhere I read an article, and it talks about that a little bit, that, like, she would just sign whatever paper they put in front of her. So how much, like, she didn't... It sounded like she wasn't paying attention or didn't necessarily know...
Well, it sounded a bit like her mind was going a bit towards the end.
Yeah, so...
Like, I don't know. It just...
Yeah.
No, I'm not buying it.
Yeah. So I also found it very interesting that, like, all of her papers, writings, whatever, are sealed or whatever. Like, nobody can access them.
Yeah.
And I found that very interesting because I was like, what? Is there something there? Or is it just because she was kind of a private person?
I don't know. Like, at some point, things will be unsealed. Like, that's the thing. You can't go, no one touches it, never, ever, 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 ever in the history of the world. Because that's not feasible. At some point, the living descendants are going to pass away or no longer have control of it. Time happens. At some point, things will be unsealed. Whether or not there's anything there, I don't know. Yeah. She's always writing. So there is something. I think the question is not, is there anything there, as opposed to, how much is there and is it finished?
Yeah.
Like, even with Go Set a Watchman, not finished. Like, it was very much a first draft.
Yeah.
I very much suspect that everything else will be in a similar state.
Yeah.
There'll be stuff there, but it won't be ready for publication. It'll get published anyway.
Well, I mean, yeah, like, it's insane when you hear about when To Kill a Mockingbird was published and how, like, boom.
Instantaneous.
Yeah. It's wild. And that, like, that provided her with enough money to live out the rest of her life.
To the point where she's being careful that she didn't make too much money.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
To have.
And I found that really interesting. And the other thing I found really fascinating was the relationship between her and Truman Capote.
I know. I didn't realize they were, like, childhood friends.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never clicked on that before.
No, I didn't know really that they were friends at all until this book. this author, Casey Cep, clearly does not like Truman Capote.
Yeah, he was not portrayed in the most favorable way, despite the fact that he and Harper Lee got along for the majority of their lives, despite leading very, very different lives.
Yes. And I don't know a lot about Truman Capote, so now I also feel like I need to read a biography of him, because he also sounds quite fascinating.
I did a quick tour through his Wikipedia, because it keeps coming up, I need to know some history here.
Yeah, but, I mean, I feel like that whole time, like, writers from that era are, like, some pretty fascinating stuff.
There was a lot of writers and a lot of crazy stuff happening. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know, like, even, like, Harper Lee and Truman Capote, they vastly different people.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that they remained friends as long as they did, like...
Yeah.
Boggles the mind slightly. And plus, like, I always think of Harper Lee as kind of, like, fairly quiet, reserved, not exactly life of the party. Whereas Truman Capote has always been quite a flamboyant character.
Yes.
I still can't make those two mesh in my brain.
Yeah.
Like, it still doesn't really click.
And even when, like, she talks about when they were researching In Cold Blood, and, like, how vastly different their styles were, and, like, you know, she was very methodical and lots of notes and organized, and he just, whatever. And, like, the fact that they were talking about that In Cold Blood, a lot of it was actually fictionalized. Yeah. By Capote, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, see, that's the thing, too, that, like, Harper Lee, her big thing was accuracy. Mm-hmm. Accuracy. And Truman Capote's, I hear your accuracy, but how about this fun story instead?
Yeah.
Like...
It's not as interesting as...
He had no problem lying and fictionalizing things, where telling a story accurately was more important to her than anything else. Yeah. So...
And so, yeah, I feel like In Cold Blood was sort of like the beginning of true crime as we know it now. And I always thought that, you know, like, you take it as fact because it's nonfiction and whatever. So I didn't realize how much he actually fictionalized it. Yeah. Well, or how many liberties he took, I guess.
It was billed as nonfiction. Yeah. And it took a bit for everybody to go, really? Yeah. Not really.
Yeah. So, yeah. The other thing that I will say, when Harper Lee was done, like, researching for her book on the murder case, she felt like she didn't have enough there to write a book. Which, to me, I was like, okay, the first half of this book makes sense now, because there clearly was not a lot to say. And so in order to make it into a book, well, we got to add all this other stuff so we have enough content.
Thus we know the full history of the dam and every fish that's ever swam in it.
You know, and so to me then I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So even she didn't think that she could write a book out of it. It sounded like she had sort of given up on that idea.
Yeah. Thing is, because it was relatively publicized, as soon as she started talking to people, and as soon as it became known that she was Harper Lee, everybody's going, okay, well, I'm going to tell you a story. It's not necessarily going to be an accurate story. Yeah. And if you care more about telling the truth and telling an accurate story than you do about making it a good story or a theatrical story, having all of these accounts where you have no idea how much of it's actually true is going to be bloody difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I can understand why she, didn't write it, didn't finish it, never published it, put it that way.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, they said, somewhere I read, if there is a book, nobody has seen it. Yeah. So...
Except for the one chapter that...
Yeah, she sent to Big Tom?
Big Tom, yeah.
So, but yeah, like, even she didn't think there was enough there. And if you look at the case really, like, okay, possibly insurance fraud. He was never convicted of anything. Not convicted of murder, nothing. So it's a lot of, like, speculation also, right? Because...
That's the thing.
Nothing was ever proven.
No. Like, I feel we could have done a little bit better in terms of the angle of research. Yeah. Like, the first part of the book, a lot of it was investigating the dam, you know, the history of that, or...
The history of insurance.
The history of insurance and that kind of thing. I don't care so much about that. I mean, the history of insurance I did find interesting, but ultimately, I've forgotten most of it already. Yeah. Why not do a bit more research into, okay, we can't say exactly this is how he grew up, but for the area, for the time period he lived in, given the fact that his family was sharecroppers, this is the environment he may have grown up in.
Mm-hmm.
And do a bit more research into that,
Yeah.
as opposed to the dam he may have left one of his cars hypothetically beside. Like, why not give me more of the socioeconomic background, as opposed to the location background?
Let's look more into the people involved in this case as opposed to the area where the case happened, or that sort of thing. Like, the history of insurance was interesting. Could have been a little shorter, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, like, I also found, like, this book is not that long. Like, it's less than 300 pages.
Yeah, that's true, too.
But it took me forever to read it.
I know!
The paragraphs are so long, and, like, the type just looks dense on the page. Like, it just looks like there's a lot. So when I was talking with Mike, my husband, the other day, I was saying I had to read this book. I had about 100 pages left, so probably a budget at least 3 hours for that. Usually I can read, like, on average, about a page a minute. So 3 hours for 100 pages is a lot.
Yeah.
Add to the fact that every time I sat down to read it, I fell asleep. So,
it's definitely not riveting true crime.
No,
or going, who did it?
It's not. I had such high hopes for this book, and the case is interesting. I did like the last half of the book much better than the first. I will admit that. And they did get through it, I think, a bit quicker than the first half, but still, even yesterday I was trying to finish, and I read, and I think I was down to like 40 pages. And so then I read like 15, and I was like, I gotta take a break. And then at supper time, Mike was like, so did you finish? And I was like, no, I have 5 pages left. And like, even that close, I had to stop because I just couldn't read it anymore.
I found the second half easier to get through. Like, I got through it in about 2 hours. And I found that it flowed a lot better.
Yeah. Oh, definitely the second half of the book was much better.
First half of the book, I'm kind of going, oh my word, this is taking forever. I want to take a break, but if I do, I'm never going to get started again. Whereas the second half, I'm going, oh, this is interesting. Tell me more. Mm-hmm. Like, it was a better book in the second half than it was in the first half. Yeah, the second half was definitely better. But even then, like, I felt like there was a lot of info there that could have been left out. Yeah. You know, like... But then it would have been a 100-page book. I know. That's the thing. Like, Harper Lee knew it. There wasn't enough there for a book. Mm-hmm. Stop harping on it. Exactly. So... I think the book would have been better if they had approached the story differently. Mm-hmm. Start with the Harper Lee thing. Yeah. Introduce, I forget the bad guy's name. The Reverend. The Reverend, right. Introduce the Reverend as, like, this is the kind of area, kind of family life this was the family life typical for the area, the profession, blah, blah, blah. So we understand the character a little bit more, because then we can kind of go, okay, well, it just makes it better. Yeah. No, like, I definitely agree. Like, if it would have been told as, like, how it actually happened. Like, let's talk about Harper Lee going down there and, like, sitting in on the trial and all, like, let's focus on that. Like, that's what I was expecting, you know? Like, a bit more... just substance, honestly. Yeah. Like, I get that there's not a whole lot known about the Reverend and his early years. However, like, the guy that shot him, we know his name. Yeah. There was no looking into what were his motives, what could have been his motives, what led him to shooting somebody at a funeral. Well, I think we know what his motive was. Well, yeah. But, like, I hate this guy, and how dare he, to... I'm at a funeral, I'm just going to shoot him. Yeah. Like, that's a fairly big leap. And what was this guy's relation to the victim of, like, the victim at the funeral he was at? Shirley? Something along those lines. Something like that. Yeah. Like, a lot more information could have been added, but that just wasn't. Yeah. Kind of feel like it should have been. Well, the actual crime part felt like a bit of an afterthought in this book to me. Like, even when you get to the part where there's the trial for the second killer who killed the Reverend, whose name I can't remember, that was one chapter in the book. Like, that could have been... There was, like, nothing. No. Considering he shot a guy at a funeral, there's nothing. Yeah. So... And he was still alive. Like, you could have done how many interviews with him? Yeah, exactly. So, I feel like definitely this book was a missed opportunity for me. Yeah.
which,
I think it could have been made a lot better if the focus of the research had gone in a different direction. Tell the story of the people, not the crime.
yeah,
Because the crime, honestly, doesn't have a whole lot.
yeah,
But if you tell the story of the people, it bulks out the crime because you can understand the motives a little bit better. Even if the motives have never been stated, you can kind of get where people might be coming from.
yeah, for sure.
That or just tell a really, really good Harper Lee biography.
Yes. And then...
Don't bill it as true crime, just tell a biography.
No, I mean, if I would not categorize this book as true crime.
No.
History, biography.
Yes.
That, to me, is what it is. So...
It's Harper Lee with a little bit of murder thrown in.
Yeah.
Throwing in.
And yeah, Harper Lee is a very interesting character, for sure.
Yes.
But yes, it actually says on the back of my book here, true crime.
It's not. Like...
It's a tiny bit true crime. But it's...
I've read more true crime in any novel.
Harsh.
I would call it, like, courtroom drama.
But no, there's...
But not even that.
There's only...
It's closer to being a courtroom drama than true crime. But still not. Like, it's a biography, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And if anybody's reading it looking for, like, thinking it's actually true crime, and that's why you picked it up, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Well...
Depending on the kind of true crime you like.
It depends, because I think I mentioned this in the first half that I heard about this book on a podcast where they were actually talking about the case. So there's two hosts of the podcast. The first one of them was covering the case and the other one was like, oh, I read this book and it was so good. And it was like, oh, okay, good. Well, you know, if they recommend something, then, you know, because I like their podcast usually, I'll check it out because, you know.
Are we the only people that don't like this book?
I don't know. But, and like, if you look at the reviews on the covers and stuff, they're glowing, but...
It's not that it's a bad book.
No, it's not. It's just not... It's not as crimey as I want it to be. That's not a word.
I need more crime.
For me, it was just very slow.
Yeah.
And it took a lot to get through it. And to the point where I was like, ugh, if I didn't have to finish this book, I maybe wouldn't finish this book.
Like, it's very factual and not in a good way.
Yeah. For me.
Like, I like the accuracy of facts as much, if not more, than the next person. But there are ways of telling those facts that still interest the reader and still present it as a story without having to go full Truman Capote and fictionalize the whole thing.
Yeah.
It didn't do that.
No.
And I'm wondering if part of the reason why is because the whole Truman Capote in Cold Blood thing, where it's like, you have to steer so far in the opposite direction.
Yes, that's true.
So there's no chance of being accused of that veered right into boring territory.
Maybe. And maybe, like, it's just not the true crime that either of us likes to read.
Maybe some people find dams and insurance history more fascinating than we do.
Yeah. For me, I was looking for more. I like true crime because it often reads like fiction, or it could read like fiction. It's exciting. There's stuff happening. There's a mystery. There's courtroom drama, all of that stuff. I like that stuff.
Yeah. Like, at some point there's plot. This book doesn't have a plot.
Not really. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt. Definitely.
Personal opinion. It's not that it's boring. Just don't go into it expecting a Ted Bundy biography.
It's not action-packed.
No.
Let's put it that way, because...
Go into it expecting a Harper Lee biography with one of the cases she was interested in kind of thrown in.
Yeah.
I found the In Cold Blood case more interesting than the case the book's actually about. Like, I like knowing the motives and the psychological reasons. That's part of what was missing from Furious Hours. There's no psychological perspective. Like, not at all.
Nothing about motive or...
He drove the car, killed her.
Yeah.
Walked away, went home.
I think the motive really was the money from the insurance. Yeah.
But there's other ways of getting money. Yeah. Like, you could rob a bank. You don't have to go to killing people in order to get money. Con men. Like...
Yeah.
You could con people out of their money without ever having to spill a drop of blood.
Yeah. And so, like, if he hadn't have gotten caught or shot...
Caught or shot.
How many more victims would there have been, I wonder? Because it sounds
everybody
like...
who had an insurance policy.
He had multiple insurance policies on many, many people.
Yeah.
And so to me, too, it's interesting to think about that. Like, where else could this have gone?
That's the thing. Like, his wife... at the time of his murder. What are your thoughts on her?
Oh, I think she definitely knew what was going on.
Oh, she helped. She helped.
Oh, yeah. She was totally in on it, I'm sure.
Like, it's too coincidental.
Yeah.
Like that, but that's the thing. That is never really explored. I don't know. It just felt like a lot more research could have been done.
Mm-hmm.
And the research that was done was into Harper Lee and her relation to the case.
Mm-hmm.
Not the case itself.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I mean, don't get me wrong, the Harper Lee stuff was really interesting.
Harper Lee is fascinating,
Yeah.
but I didn't read it because of Harper Lee.
No.
I read it because of true crime.
Yeah.
And I got Harper Lee and not true crime. And
Yeah.
I like the Harper Lee stuff, but I'm here to true crime.
I know. So we're going to have to do another one at some point, another
Yes.
true crime book, because this one just didn't check those boxes for me,
No.
sadly.
I shouldn't be bored during true crime.
No,
Like-
I know. It shouldn't be like... I mean, it is... True crime is nonfiction. For me, nonfiction is always a little bit tougher to read. Even if it is true crime, like, it's better, but sometimes I still need to take a pause in the middle, but...
Thing is, if it's good nonfiction, I don't have any difference between the two, really.
Yeah.
But it has to be a subject that I'm interested in. Like, true crime, providing it's not terrible,
Yeah.
to me, it reads at the same rate as fiction.
Yeah.
In Defense of Witches certainly didn't.
No,
But-
I wouldn't call that true crime, though, either.
Yeah, but I mean, as
Oh,
nonfiction.
it's nonfiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
But then there's books like Stalin's Daughter, which I couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
Like, fascinating. This didn't get me from either angle.
Yeah. I know. I have another true crime book recommended by the same podcast people. Now I'm hesitant to read it because what if it's terrible?
I don't trust them anymore. Which one is it?
It's called Starvation Heights. I can't remember. They talked about the case on the podcast. I can't remember. I believe it was girls living in a, I don't want to say group home, but something like that, and like mistreated, and I can't remember. It was a long time ago. It's been sitting on my shelf for a while.
Now you've been burned and I'm never going to pick it up again.
There's just not enough time to read all the books that I want to read.
That's the problem with working in a library. You got more books than you have time for.
Yes. And authors keep putting out new books, and
How dare they?
I know, there's just too many books. Not enough time. I need to retire.
It's a good problem to have.
I need to retire so I can read all my books.
Oh, yeah.
But
Do you have any true facts for us?
I have...
True facts?
True facts.
No, I want fake facts, Janine.
I have some author info. So Casey Cep is a staff writer at The New Yorker. Of herself, she says, I grew up in the Lutheran Church, and I often say that Sunday services were my first book club, because week after week, very thoughtful, very loving people gathered around the same book and tried to figure out what it meant. I was steeped in scripture as a kid, and I've devoted quite a lot of my adult life to studying religion and theology, so I find it is one of the great themes that interests me, not only as a writer, but as a person in the world, trying to figure out how to be a good partner and community member and citizen of the cosmos. I end up writing about it so much because I think about it so much, which I found very interesting, to think of church as like a book club where you're studying a book.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought that was...
It's definitely a different way of going about it.
Yeah, I know. And so that's why I chose to include this quote, because I was like, I never thought of it that way before. I don't know that I would necessarily classify it the same way, because
No.
to me, book club involves discussion. And there's not always a lot of discussion in church. It depends.
No, I would say like a youth group or Bible study would be more
Yeah.
of a book club than a church group.
But I just thought that was really interesting. Like,
that does kind of explain the book a bit. She's not true crime.
so, yeah. And Harper Lee, obviously the well-known author of To Kill a Mockingbird, she also won a Pulitzer Prize for the book.
Mm-hmm.
Her most recent publication, Ghost at a Watchman, which we've already discussed.
How it was stolen and published under false pretenses.
Youth, allegedly.
Allegedly. Don't sue me.
Alleged by Jess.
Yes, allegedly, just to clarify.
Although, I think I did read that online, too, when I was looking up.
I'm pretty sure we're not the first ones to come to that conclusion.
No. So, yeah. And then Harper Lee's first name is actually Nell.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with her in terms of writing as Harper Lee. Because can you
Yes.
imagine how annoying it would be if your name is Nell and is constantly mispronounced as Nellie,
Yes.
and to have a last name Lee, Nellie Lee.
Yes.
Nellie Lee.
So yes, she dropped it when she published To Kill a Mockingbird because people would always mispronounce it as Nellie, and she didn't like that.
Yeah.
Even though it's spelled Nell like Belle. If you look at the name Belle,
Thing is, you still, if you say her entire name, it's still Nell Lee.
Yeah, that's
Like,
true.
You're just not winning with that name.
Yes.
Whereas Harper Lee, much better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's our final thoughts on the book.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking for true crime as stereotypical true crime, this book is not it. If you're looking for more of a, like, what the author biography thing that you read there, it makes a bit more sense now, because her focus is on a lot more of the community aspects.
Yeah.
That is what the book does. It does not dig deep into the true crime part of it. It digs deep into the community aspects of it and the area. So, if that's what you prefer, you're gonna love the book.
Yeah.
If you prefer a bit more of the, Ted Bundy kind of thing, this book is not for you.
It's definitely not action-packed.
No. If you like Harper Lee, you'll love the book.
Yep.
But
yeah, the Harper Lee parts were very good. I will say that.
yes. With that, we will leave you. See you on the next Between the Lines.
Reminder that all of the content here is our personal opinions.
Except for the facts. The facts are facts.
The facts are facts, true. But these are opinions. If you disagree, that's fantastic.
It's your prerogative. Tell us what you think in the comments.
Yes, let us know. So that's our show for this week. Thank you all for listening.
And thank you to our editor, Linda, for editing this into a cohesive mess.
And we'll see you next time.